When I was younger, I remember Australians being industrious, wealthy and free of debt. I remember Australia as being a wealthy country and free of debt. When we did our research, we found that this all seemed to change from 1970, and now not only do most Australians have a lot of credit card debt, farmers have enormous debt, and Australia has debt which is increasing all the time. And it seems as though we have taken our lesson from the world, who have gone into enormous debt, and we feel, our politicians feel, it's okay because the debt that we're building is nothing like what it is for the rest of the world. This is a stupid situation. There are many factors which have caused us to go into decline, and I want to go first to what the late Endersby showed us when he showed that before 1970 we were on an upward path with all developed countries and thought we would go up and up forever. But he then told me that when we, in 1970, when developed countries decided that they would help out developing countries by starting to reduce tariffs, no one, except perhaps Lance and a few others, realised that the implication of this would be that it would put us onto a path of ever decreasing GDP growth, while developing countries came up very strongly, and now they pass us and have greater, in most cases, greater GDP growth. Now, this leads us to a graph which is not perhaps very easy to understand. It's current account. Now, the current account for any country and for Australia shows a zero line where if you're above zero, then it means that you have money to spend, and if you've got enough of it, then you can actually lend to the rest of the world. Prior to 1970, we had been in a situation for, well, probably since Australia started, of being around the zero line, but usually a certain amount above it. While Australia had a positive current account, we were able to build Burrinjuck Dam, the hydro associated with it, the Murrumbidgee irrigation area, Blowering Dam. The Holden car was developed and exported. We had our steel industry. We had developing our aluminium industry, and we had a strong rail network and the maintenance of it. Now, in 1970, when we started to reduce tariffs, the relationship of that means that our current account started to falter a bit, but as the free trade got more and more extensive, then it meant that we were coming down with a far greater deficit, but also a far greater rate of deficit. This is going to be even worse still, because it means that we have borrowed money from overseas, and overseas interest rates are down around zero. With this situation where we're borrowing money from overseas at almost no interest rate, we find that we have the Greek situation, which could blow up in as soon as 3 days, and the fact that most countries are printing huge amounts of money, and that house of cards is likely to drop at any time, and interest rates will then going up. So that not only will we have an ever-increasing rate of the deficit, but we'll also have the extra interest that we'll be paying on it, and that will take us even further down. Geographically, Australia is an island, but financially we certainly are not. If we just had this problem in Australia in isolation, and we had someone like the British, as it was before, while it was British empires here, or the American Empire, to help us out, what we find here is that Australia is in a bad situation, because when it comes to the current account compared to the rest of the world, this is the 0 point here. This is us, about halfway down to the bottom. And we certainly cannot rely on America, because they are way down here. They are worse than anyone because of all of the money printing. Now, because we are down here and we need to be borrowing from someone, there are very few countries in the world who are in a position to lend, and they include China, Russia, Scandinavian countries, Saudi Arabia. Now, it shows Venezuela and Libya, but actually since this was done, I think that they've now come back on the pack. Now, this means that because the problems that we are talking about here with the current account deficit is the problem that the whole world has, that certainly the whole of the developed world has, as far as current account. At present, the problem is that we have a world where the developed countries are addicted to debt, and we have become addicted to debt. So this is going to cause huge problems in a very short time, perhaps starting as early as the Greek crisis, for the whole of the world, including us. Now, even though there will be many countries who are in a worse situation than us, we'll still get drawn into that problem. So we want to make sure that as a country with debt that we feel that we could control, we should be aiming at getting our politicians to look at revenue, real revenue, not the airy-fairy promises made by Joe Hockey, to get us back here as quickly as possible. Now, if we don't do that, then it means that the predictions made by Lance Endersby means that we will continue on this path. The point we want to be making is that 1970 was the key date. Prior to this date, Australians and Australia had no debt. Because of 1970, when we went into tariff reduction, our research showed that due to the tariff reduction, then rural farm debt grew exponentially. Australian credit card debt grew probably in the same way. And then at a later stage, Australian government debt grew dramatically. Now, this is our research is telling us that the relationship between tariff reduction and debt, and we cannot get any agreement to this. So what we did is that we drew a diagram showing tariff reduction, and what our research is showing us that there is an inverse relationship, an inverse exponential relationship between tariff reduction and farm debt. This is a key part of the whole situation. So when we did have a meeting with Michael McCormack, and we showed him that and asked him if he could comment on it, and his only explanation for it was the weather. Now, this of course is quite stupid, but we want to get to every politician, and particularly Barnaby Joyce, Warren Truss, Ian Macfarlane, Joe Hockey and Tony Abbott, and ask each one of them if they can see that relationship, and if they cannot, first, do they accept that this is happening? And then, if they can, then what is their reason for it going like that? All of our research is showing that tariff reduction, universal free trade, Trans-Pacific Partnership, which are all the same thing, which are the policy of both major parties, causing the downfall of Australia. So when we look at it from another point of view, there are three relationships that we want to look at tariff, debt, and reducing GDP. So that first we want to make sure that we get either agreement or else reason why this does not apply. Now, when we look at information that comes from the Bureau of Statistics every quarter, we can get a graph of GDP growth. We had a good GDP growth while we had our mining boom. The mining boom is now over, and even though we find that Joe Hockey and others talk about the transition from mining boom to whatever is going to save us in the future, but never tells us exactly why and what, and it's just not happening. We're not transitioning to anything. And so each quarter we're finding that we seem to be going further down. Now, if we do pull up a little bit, the important thing is this line here represents break even as far as debt is concerned. This is around 3.2% GDP, which is the figure given by Joe Hockey. As long as this is below that, then we've got an ever increasing slope of debt. If we can bring this up a bit, then the debt increase slope goes down a bit, but we're still getting ever increasing debt. So that we want to be able to have people understand what this is. There's going to be 4 or 5 more of these before the next federal election. We want to be putting it onto YouTube and Facebook and tracing this as it goes further. Our prediction compared to Joe Hockey's prediction.